on Game Mess Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, Rockstar loses another big game, and the games industry is growing in the United States. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host of Game Mess Mornings. It's Lex Luddy, everybody. Lexi, how are you doing?
So tired, Jeff. Jeff, I'm so tired. Nah, I'm okay.
I'm
alive.
It's wild out there. I tell you, like every minute of this weekend was either doing like stuff I have to do around the house, feed the kids, mow the lawn. I'm traveling soon, so I got to get stuff done like with that in mind, or playing games for work. And there's a lot. I got like three games sort of prepped and ready to go for quick looks. And now I got to take the kid to speech later today. So I'm like, when am I going to do that? We'll figure it out after this. Having some issues with some games and stuff like that. It'll be a whole thing. So yeah, it's been busy, but you've been traveling and all these games are coming out. I'm like, listen, I'm looking forward to PAX, but this is the most messed up weekend that PAX could have ever happened, is the week that Starfield comes out.
I've just fucking given up on playing games at the moment. I'm just like, I'll just play some like fucking Kirby. I'll keep chipping away at that. Because I just gave up on like trying the Steam Deck. I love it. That travel case is fucking huge. And I was like, I'm not putting that into a bag. But yeah, I was at Gamescom, and I'm starting college up next week. So I have to move again to move back for college. And yeah, I think my roommate had access to Armored Core for review. They only got like 2 days early. So they were trying to play it on like an airplane and shit on their Steam Deck. That didn't seem like a great idea. But yeah, I think it's just impossible to stay up with any of the games at the moment, and just hope that there'll be enough of a lull towards winter. Maybe I say hopefully, but then I think about the stuff that I saw at Gamescom, and I'm like, no, I want to play all the shit that's coming out in winter.
Yep, it's going to be, again, non-stop. In fact, I think reviews dropped this morning for Sea of Stars. Maybe we'll take a look in that. I played a little bit of that game. I've been so busy, I've only had enough time to play a little bit. I think Jan's played a little bit more, but he's also playing a ton of stuff. So we'll see. We'll see what we can talk about. We'll see when we can do stuff with that game. But what I played of it, I really like. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it looks really good.
We've got plenty to get into, but let's explain what we do here first. Most weekdays, I, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe even some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings, or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. All
Before we jump into the news,
please.
Yes, I need to thank you for doing Game Mess last week, because walking around the show floor and having something to listen to so that I could distract myself from the throngs of people, it allowed me to elevate to a higher plane. Just you and Jan and Emma Fife, and I can't remember who else was on last week, but it was very, very nice. The other thing I wanted to talk about, because it came up a bit, and it was the conversation on the ground at Gamescom, was safety at these events.
Oh, sure.
And I think it's something that's like worth actually giving a little bit of time to.
Oh yeah, please. Yeah, because I mean, obviously a lot of this is going to be spurred from GTA 6 guy going up on stage and yelling about that game during opening night live. And this is that being the second time something's like happened like that to Jeff Keighley. And if you can get to Jeff Keighley, you can get to any of us. Yeah,
and I think something that I said on Twitter, and I stand by it, like, I think Jeff does a great job with those shows. He puts a lot of work in. But if you've been working on making these shows, he's hired to make these shows. He's hired to run these shows. He's an event organizer now. He's not a journalist. He's an event organizer.
Oh, yeah.
And if you get hired to do that, you don't just get hired to do the fun stuff. You don't just get hired to meet the directors, to talk to people that you like and hang out with cool people. You also have to go, hey, I don't own this, thing, but what is our security like? Because we are selling tickets to the public, and are we actually going to look at who's coming in, and also are we going to, check their bags carefully? The first day of Gamescom, me personally, I just walked in an hour early.
I mean, but like, let's be real. Like, how many people are at Gamescom? I think the number this year was 350,000 people.
Yeah.
There's not really a security force on Earth that can check that many people.
And I do agree with you, but I also definitely feel that the security that was there, maybe this year more than last year, felt lax in certain ways. It's good when you get to the business area and there's pure, like, it's people from the actual companies checking who's coming in to see the games, because they know their shit. But when it's the people that the Clone Mesa has hired out, and, like, I'm not holding anything against them, they're just doing their job, but, like, they have so many people to get through that it's just, like, there came a point where, like, my bags weren't checked several times going in. Other people has had their bags checked by having the sides tapped of them, and then they were just, like, let through. And I definitely was, like, I had a moment where I was like, if we were to do, like, an E3 again, and they tried to open it up to the public, and this was the style of security, I would not feel safe going.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that came up a lot towards the end of the show was that despite the industry coming a long way, it is still dangerous to be a minority person, a person of color, a queer woman, any kind of woman in the industry at these events. By Sunday, I had heard stories of people being harassed at booths, people having awkward encounters in the business area, which it just is not fucking on. I heard stories of a certain person in a business area giving out to a journalist about a review at their website for it being too low, which is some real fucking good old day shit.
Even back in the good old days, that feels like that rarely happened. It's like, man, that's just bad form all around.
And that wound up the worst thing that I heard during the event, and I won't go into too many details. I had my wallet stolen, but that was more of a me being an idiot problem. But there were stories of people getting roofied, parties, and then waking up.
That happens at all these events.
Yeah, and the fact that we are still doing this at every event, and we've gotten to the point where we're just like, this just happens. The fact that someone can wake up by the side of a extremely deep river, in the middle of, like, the night towards the morning by a taxi driver and not know what happened to them, and then they have to go in and work in the show floor the next day. That's fucked. And I think the industry needs to have a proper conversation about how we actually keep ourselves safe, because you can't send developers, you can't send press, you can't send people to work at these shows for work. Like, we're there to work, we're there to do our jobs,
right?
And have it be straight up dangerous in places, and we all just accept it.
Yep, and this is we've heard stories like this out of GDC, and it definitely happened at, like, E3, and it's one of those things where it does require active engagement from people worried, like, making an effort on these things, because otherwise it's like, as soon as you're like, well, we solved that problem, it'll come back, and it'll usually come roaring back. So I think you're never going to stamp out every problem, but you need to be making every effort, and it needs to be at top of mind, because that's when, at least when people know that you're doing something about it, it might mitigate some of these attempts to make these events nightmares for someone else. Yes, and we had not been talking about it leading up to something like Gamescom, and you hope, like, okay, well, let's start talking about what did happen, and so that next year, that if they don't address it, that there's no excuse anymore. There's absolutely no excuse.
We always talk about it after these events. We never talk about before. We never say, hey, here are some. You see a couple of threads going around, but you don't see them get shared that widely. Of like, hey, if you see me and you're feeling distressed or you're in a bad spot, come up and talk to me and I'll help you out. We do see things like that, but we see so little of it before, and we don't see it on the company side of them talking to their developers before they send them out, and they're like, hey, if something happens to you, you can come to our HR and talk to us about it, which is what HR should be there to do, to protect those people. We know that they're obviously there to protect the company, but if the company's sending their employees, it should be in their interest to protect their people. I think this is something that we just need to talk about before these events rather than after. Because people go to these events, they get excited, they start having fun, and that's when bad shit happens.
Yeah, and we see that even just, like, having the conversation, people could be like, it just, like, what good is talk? But we have these conversations about, like, hey, Jeff Keighley didn't have a lot of people a lot of women on stage during Summer Game Fest. and it definitely wasn't perfect at opening night live, but you could tell that he heard that criticism and made some attempts to do something about it the next time around. It still wasn't great, but it was much better. And I think that, and all of that comes from just like talking about it, which is inherently criticism, which is what we're trying to do here. And I think it's worth continuing to have that conversation. And maybe like, you're right, asking these questions directly to these organizations as we go into them. Maybe we'll ask PAX what they're doing this year. All right, let's. Thanks for bringing that up, Lexi. I appreciate it.
No, it's fine.
All right, let's.
Me soapbox.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, I mean, going there and seeing it firsthand and hearing those stories, I'm glad you were able to relay that here. Okay, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with Rockstar Games has lost its vice president of writing. This comes from My Nintendo News. Rockstar Games, the developers behind the beloved Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption series, has lost yet another writer. Vice President of Writing, Michael Unsworth, has left the studio according to his LinkedIn profile. This is now the second of 3 writers who worked on the critically acclaimed Red Dead Redemption 2 who have left the company. Rockstar Games previously lost Dan Houser, not Dan Houser, who was the lead writer for a number of classic Rockstar games. Michael Unsworth has worked on games like Grand Theft Auto 4, a bunch of the DLC, Chinatown Wars, Midnight Club, Red Dead Redemptions, Max Payne 3, LA Noire, Red Dead Online. Just contributed a lot and was now vice president of writing. This is, I think, part of this shift of what's going on over at Rockstar, where the people that made Rockstar originally have sort of run out of a highway over there underneath Take-Two and underneath Rockstar itself to like make their careers make sense. At a certain point, you can only move up so high in an organization. Like
we created a title called VP of Writing.
Exactly.
A very real position that makes a lot of sense when you think about it.
Exactly. Right. Yes. It is definitely one of those like, hey man, we know you got to, you want to keep moving up. We'll just make something up for you and throw you a bone. So yeah, like at a certain point, like that's just not going to work anymore. There's nowhere else for you to go. You got to start your own thing, go to a different studio that might make you an actual like C-suite level executive or something like, chief creative officer. Also kind of a made up thing, but that's still like, above what a vice president would be. And I think a lot of these guys just felt stifled and now they're looking to go, stretch their legs somewhere else. And that's normal. That happens in the games industry. But what do you think it means for the future of Rockstar?
Yeah, I think I'm not surprised that there was a lot of like doomer sentiment around this on Twitter where people were like, oh, they've lost another one, like it's obviously fucked, whatever. I think that this is the type of progression that we actually want in the industry. We want senior people to leave and start new things so that more junior people who have also been there for like 10 years can actually take the lead reins on these projects and then say like, no, this is what we're doing. And also the stories that we've heard from Rockstar recently, or the Skullbutt is like, hey, it's quite a different studio to what it was 5-10 years ago. It's a lot more buttoned up. They took on board a lot of the criticism they got. I'm not sure if there's still problems. There probably still is. But I'm sure if you grew up or if you spent your entire career working in a place that was one type of culture and then it goes to a more structured culture and a different culture, there is definitely a part of you that's like, well, like, this wasn't what I was doing. I may as well get out now. Or even like, hey, the type of writing that I was doing, like, it's not the type of writing they want anymore. You saw that with GTA 5 when it re-released on the new consoles. They removed some of the extremely offensive depictions of trans people in it because they were like, hey, this was dry, cutting, satirical comedy in 2013. It wasn't. But now people will straight up call us out for this. And I think maybe there's a part where if you're a writer, you're like, well, maybe I've just like need to go try doing my writing stuff somewhere else and do it somewhere where those ideas will either get through, or maybe I start with a wholly new idea instead of just trying to like find the remaining crumbs of modern political satirical comedy that I haven't already tackled. Let someone else from a new perspective try to tackle it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all those factors, right? All that pressure of having to follow up Grand Theft Auto 5 and 4 and 3 and all those games with a new Grand Theft Auto that is just as satirical and makes sense in 2023, a proposition that is already nearly impossible to imagine someone pulling that off. And then you're right, like it's like, well, if they do pull it off, do they still kind of go to those same wells that they always went to, which I would expect that they like the same creative team probably would. And that stuff, you're right. Probably, I think within Rockstar, even that stuff's probably like, hey, this is played out. Like, even if it's, we're hurting people's feelings a lot of times. But if we're going to be like, well, comedy hurts people's feelings and we're going to be that way about it, even doing that, a lot of these jokes just aren't that funny anymore. And I can imagine that conversation being like, hey, I wrote one of the best selling games of all time. I don't have to listen to anybody else, or I feel like I shouldn't have to argue to get my jokes through. Like you were saying, I think, that could be the kind of thing where, hey, I could go do my own thing. I have enough money. I have enough sway. There's enough money out there.
Things, it's always a culmination of factors. It's never like, usually it's never just one thing. If it's someone who has a position that is clearly quite high up and they're probably doing quite well for themselves, there's usually probably quite a bit of things that are pushing them out and also pulling them out at the same time, like reasons why they would go somewhere else and do something else.
And I mean, and then the fandom, right? I mean, the fandom seems rabid, I should say.
The Raving Rabbits.
The Raven and the Rabbits. They are just losing their mind out there on multiple shows, screaming GTA 6 in front of Jeff Keighley and rushing stages. It's like, oh man, it's not worth all this. It's just Grand Theft Auto, guys.
I've had this conversation with people a bunch this weekend, but like, you could not pay me enough to be a community manager at a big company.
Yeah, like, especially Rockstar. Yeah,
Rockstar, Activision, Bungie, any of those. I'd like. Blizzard, just the amount of, imagine logging on every day, Jeff, and having to like try to explain things to those people who are just going to yell at you no matter what, and have to be polite all the time. It's like that image of Daisy in Smash Bros, where it's like, don't you ever just want to lose your shit? That's what I imagine they're like constantly.
Yes, definitely. Now, as for like what someone like Michael Unsworth could end up doing, he's probably going to start his own thing or join another team. But I mean, there's enough money out there that he could just go.
Build a Rocket Boy is very nearby.
Yes, like exactly. Yeah, he can go work with them.
And they're hiring. They are definitely hiring up.
Yep. So we'll see. But like all these big names from Rockstar that are leaving are gonna go somewhere else, start their own thing, work with one of these other teams that have already started their own thing, and they'll kind of keep doing that work somewhere else, and then they can like kind of start fresh without the expectations attached to Grand Theft Auto and leave that problem over to Take-Two, and they'll be happy to do that, I think. All right, the U.S. video game industry gets back to growth. This comes from Matt Piscatella at Circana. The decade has been a turbulent one for the U.S. video game industry. It began with the surge in players' engagement and dollars from people wanting to stay connected to family and friends through the pandemic. This was followed by similar declines across all measures with a return to spending on experiences, which happened to come along with new hardware console supply constraints and numerous game delays thrown in for good measure. Today, however, the supply of new generation hardware has improved and stabilized. Blockbuster games are being released and player engagement patterns have settled into a new normal. This has allowed the market to settle after months of wild swings, both higher and lower. Below are some of the factors that are influencing the market today and will be worth following closely moving forward. Circana expects the U.S. video game market to finish 2023 having delivered 3% growth, reaching $58.3 billion in the United States. Hardware did much of the heavy lifting in getting the market back to growth over the past 12 months. Sales of new hardware products contributed $7 billion of the $57 billion in total video game spending in the U.S. market over the past 12 months. That's 19% higher than the same period a year ago. On a trended basis, the $57 billion in spending over the past 12 months is 1% higher than a year ago and 13% above the pre and early pandemic 12-month period ended in July 2020. Lexi,
we did it, gamers.
Right. The things are back on track. Here's the thing. So we were in the pandemic, and the word then was people are staying at home. They have a bunch of money, and they're spending that money where they can because they can't spend it anywhere else. And where they can is video games. They're getting video game system, and they're buying a lot of video games. And then this will evaporate. This sort of surge will evaporate after the pandemic. And you know, there was always like a pushback to that. Like even during the time, it was like, well, you know, buying a hardware is a big investment. Those people are probably going to keep buying games. But the question was like, okay, will we still see like a continuation in the acquisition of new hardware? And, you know, with the new generation kind of starting up at the same time, it's like, well, this might work out well, where a lot of these people are now just considering themselves gamers. They're very excited about games. Yeah, they might keep upgrading and drawing other people in. And it seems like that's what's happened in the United States, is that much of the momentum that was gained during the pandemic has remained. Not all of it, but it's not like some huge drop off anymore. Like it dropped a little bit from coming out of like 2021 into 2022, and now it's settled into this state of like, okay, back to like 3% growth, which is probably sustainable for the industry. Do you feel
American
like
politics makes a lot more sense if you consider every single year there's more and more gamers?
Yes, exactly. Every day there's another gamer. That's the biggest issue that we have right now as a society. Do you feel like a difference in like the mainstream popularity of gaming from before the pandemic to now, or is it just like one of those like slow things that's hard to notice when you're looking at it every day?
This is actually a super good question, because while I was in Cologne, I met up with a friend of mine from school that like I knew in Ireland, and he wasn't a gamer, not at all. Like loved languages, lived in the Gaeltacht for a while, just loved being offline, totally offline. And I met up with him and his boyfriend, and over the pandemic, they got way into games. And they were talking to me about GamesCom. And they've been living in Cologne for years now. And they straight up were going to GamesCom for the first time this year, because they were like, we've gotten so into video games over the last while, we'd like to. They only have a Switch, but like they love Bayonetta. They love The Sims. They love stuff like Katamari Damacy. Like they love games that aren't... You know, they love big games like The Sims. They love games that break through into the popular culture, but they're also buying and spending money on like games that we would consider gamer games, like relatively less mainstream games. They love it where they really like, or they recognize the Atlas logo that I had on a bag that I had been given, and I was like, oh, I didn't think you'd like know that like Atlas was part of Sega. You like, okay, that's cool. But like, you know, I do think that there's definitely a bit of people who are getting casually into games are getting more literate in games, and people who are more literate in games are also more influential people are becoming more literate in games, and suddenly games, I think Ronan Farrow did their piece about Elon Musk, and they wrote about how, you know, people were basically saying like, hey, knowing the culture of video games is now a big part of knowing the culture in general, because it does affect the culture in general. And I think that that is a very keen observation, because it is... Games were popular for a long time, but they weren't popular in a way that like would be small talk at the office. They were popular in the way that like you'd go home and you'd play them, and you wouldn't talk about them at work the next day. Whereas now people will talk about Elden Ring around the office cooler, you know? I do think that there's definitely that turn. But then you also have the case where in some countries, like in Ireland, where we no longer have a dedicated video game retailer, it feels more disparate than it was. It feels more like all that stuff only happens online now. So we're in a weird spot with that stuff. People want to buy more game stuff, and they want to talk about more game stuff, and more of that is going online. And I think you can, as when a lot of conversations went online during the pandemic, whether that's a good or a bad thing is very much so up for debate, because the type of, you know, conversations we have online are very different to the types of conversations we have in person.
Yeah, I think for a lot of these people that are more casual and aren't part of these conversations, they are still like part of that overall conversation, but it's happening for them on Instagram, it's happening for them on TikTok, and they're like getting little tidbits of these games, and that way, like these like Baldur's Gate 3 and Elden Ring or Zelda couldn't feel more mainstream, because they are like fueling these huge content sites that like just keep people engaged in these things over and over and over again.
I mean, Ben Affleck was at that Valorant thing, and he was talking about like how they nerfed a character. I was like, God damn it, I love you, Ben Affleck. You're such a tragedy. I love you.
You love the tragedy, Ben Affleck. I absolutely do. My meme folder on my computer is just titled Ben Affleck. That doesn't only have Ben Affleck in it, but it's got a lot of Ben Affleck in it.
It represents the aura.
And he absolutely represents the aura. All right, let's see. Despite supply constraints early in the generation, each console is comparing well to prior hardware releases. On a comparative basis, PlayStation 5 is now trending 5% above PlayStation 4, something that was not doing like for years because of the supply constraint, and now it's just shooting past the PS4. And it's 87% ahead of the PlayStation 3 in time-aligned units sold life to date. While Xbox Series trails Xbox One by 10%, yet leads Xbox 360 by 6%.
It's wild. That feels like it should be flipped.
It should, but Xbox One sold faster than the Xbox 360. That's I know it's hard for me to grok that. I imagine everyone else is like, it doesn't seem right, but Xbox One did relatively well, all things considered, for what it was. Okay, so when I had Phil on the couch at Summer Game Fest, and I kind of was like talking about like hardware seeming like the console hardware seeming like, it's stuttering for Xbox. And he's like, well, we're growing, Game Pass fastest on PC. And he's definitely talked multiple times before and since about how it is not all about selling the hardware for them. Do you think it's a chicken and egg situation where it's like, well, the hardware is not selling, or it is, it's doing faster than the Xbox 360. It's fine. This is probably okay. This is like within the realm of acceptability for them, but I think they would want to be ahead of the Xbox One. I think the Xbox Series consoles are definitely better than the Xbox One consoles. In my opinion, they should be selling better. So do you think like if we were in a world where they were, a healthy amount ahead of the Xbox One, the Xbox Series consoles, do you think their conversation or their tone would change a little bit in how they talk about hardware sales?
Yeah, I definitely think that if they were selling more consoles, they'd be more open to a half-step console. Because if they're selling more consoles, they have more people who will be interested in upgrading a console. If they're selling more consoles, they also will have like more space on retailer store shelves. I walked into a GameStop in Cologne, and about 50% of it was Funko Pops. About 40% of it was like fucking PS4 games. Then about 5% was Switch and Xbox. And like that's very anecdotal, but you see it visibly when you go into physical locations that they just don't have the mind space that they once did, or the mind share that they once had. I think things would be very different for Xbox if PS5 hadn't become a trending item, if it hadn't become a dead drop item. Yeah. And I think weirdly enough, the PlayStation 5 being extremely hard to get was one of the best things that happened to them this generation.
Yep.
Because suddenly it meant that a lot of people who just liked collecting shit, and a lot of people got into collecting shit over the pandemic, I say pointing at all of those fucking assholes on the back shelf.
He's pointing at me, though.
Yeah. But like suddenly you had a item that was worth more than just its cost. It was worth the bragging rights of having it. And that's something that's quite powerful in economics.
I mean, yes. And it like, again, especially during the pandemic and when the things were so hard to come by, like you aren't just getting the item and you aren't just like having the bragging rights. Like, those are huge, but you're like, this is access to, this is defense against FOMO, because now I can be on part of the conversations when any game is coming out. And like, I don't think a lot of people were even thinking any one particular game. There probably was one or two games they wanted to play. They were certainly happy that the games that they were playing before on PS4 were running better on PS5. But it was mostly just like, hey, we trust the PlayStation first party games, and I don't want to like be in a situation where one of those games comes out and I'm gonna miss out. So I'm gonna do everything I can to get that. And Xbox just has completely missed out on all of those factors. Through these first couple of years. Starfield feels like the first real opportunity for that to change. I'm very interested to see
if how much sales go up.
Absolutely. Through this holiday. Like, what does sales for Xbox look like through this holiday? And it's like, man, it'd be, I bet they wish they can get that game running at 60 frames per second on console. I don't think it's going to affect sales all that much, but
I bet they really wish they had Forza for December.
Yes.
To like really, like, I bet they wish they had a second punch to follow this up.
When is Forza? Isn't Forza out this year?
Is Forza out this year?
I think Forza's out this year. I think it's I want to say November, but now I'm just guessing because I can't even think. I can't think past this week. So
let me check.
I think they will, but it's like October. That's right. Forza is October.
Okay. In which case, then they do have a really strong 1-2 punch.
Yes, and that game will be a graphics showcase on the Xbox, no matter what. At the same time, we get hung up on these things, and I certainly do.
You'd never overanalyze anything in the industry, Jeff.
Never would. It's they do seem like they are looking past the console. I just like selling these games on Steam, selling obviously Game Pass subscriptions, whether that's on PC or console. That does seem to be the thing that they're focused on. I just don't know how big of an audience they're going to be able to reach for that if they aren't also rapidly growing the console base. I know, like he says, it's growing fastest on PC, and of course it is, because everyone who's got an Xbox is going to have it already. So the people, like, you're still able to convince people on PC. I totally get why that's happening. But it's like, okay, well, once you've sort of saturated the people who are likely to do on a PC, now are you able to like grow to this next level to make this all make sense? And I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think we've seen a lot of like launchers close down or like fold into Steam? Do you think they reach a point where the line stops going up on the Microsoft Store and they go, okay, we're not going to get anyone else to come start using the Microsoft Store and using Game Pass through the Microsoft Store? What if we start selling Game Pass on Steam? Do you think they get to that point?
I think they do, probably. Yeah, I think Valve would be like, yeah, we could do that, no problem. And I think Microsoft would be willing to do it at some point. Right now, it's like, they own Windows. There's no reason they shouldn't be able to reach people with Game Pass on PC using Windows machines like directly.
But that's what's just so bad. It's so bad compared to all the other stores. And it's kind of unacceptable that it's so bad because they have so much money and they have the experience and they know what makes a good store. Like the Xbox store on their consoles is very easy to use. Going through Game Pass on your console is quite easy to use. Going through it on your PC, it's just like, oh, this feels like I'm trying to play a console emulator on a PC. Like, why doesn't this feel good?
Yeah. Someone in chat's like, why would Valve say no problem? And then they said no problem to EA Plus. And really what they said was, what happened there? And again, this is my reporting here. So this is EA, or I think actually Valve went to EA. It's like, hey, what can we do to get Apex Legends on Steam? And EA was like, hey, what can we do to get EA Plus on Steam? And they're like, well, let's just do both things and make it that'll be a swap season. We'll be happy, and both sides will be happy. That's kind of all it took to get Valve to like agree to that. I imagine Microsoft and Valve's strong relationship, which is pretty strong. Like, Microsoft says, hey, Valve, we'll sign a thing saying we'll put Call of Duty on your shit for 10 years. And Gabe's like, no, we trust you. We're good. We don't believe in that sort of thing. We just want to be a cool place that people want to put their stuff out on.
Do you think Gabe Newell sends Phil Spencer knives at Christmas?
I know he does. 100% he does. So I think like that sort of thinking would be like, okay, well, yeah, if someone wants to put another subscription service on Steam, we're not going to be afraid of that. Like, that's just another thing that's going to keep our market dynamic and keep us pushing us forward. So I think Valve would be okay with it. All right, let's move along here. Microsoft axes Game Pass free trial ahead of Starfield launch. This is from Claire Jackson at Kotaku. It's no secret that Game Pass is an exceptionally great deal for Xbox and PC gamers. $10 a month gets you access to more games than you could ever possibly hope to finish in a month. And like many online gaming services, Microsoft offered ways of trying the service at a lower cost. That's no longer the case, it would seem, as the company appears to have pulled trial offers just ahead of one of the most highly anticipated game launches in recent years, Starfield. Microsoft not only offers different tiers for Game Pass, but it used to offer a very simple way to try out the service. For $1, it would let you dive into the massive download library for a month if you were a first-time user. But back in early August, when Microsoft hiked the price of its most expensive Game Pass Ultimate service to $17, and the company reduced the free trial to just 14 days. And now, at the end of August, it would seem that there's no way to try out the service for any reduced amount or any amount of time. You got to pay full price. This is, I think, kind of speaks to the topic we were just discussing, where it's like, okay, do they feel the pressure to make moves like this to ensure, like, when they have a big beat like Starfield, it has the maximum amount of impact for something like Game Pass? And to me, everything they've done sounds like, yes, they are. It is very important to them that when they have a hit, it funnels things in the direction they want things to go, which is Game Pass. Is that how you read this?
Yeah, Jesse in the chat mentions that they tend to take away the steal before a big game comes out.
Yes.
And I don't think this has become a story for previous big games because they just haven't been as big or as anticipated.
Definitely.
But boy, if they bring back the free trial a month after this comes out, or the $1 trial a month after this comes out, there's going to be some people who will be quite annoyed about it and be quite vocal about it, because everyone's talking about Starfield, and suddenly any story that you can hook into that will become somewhat relevant. I definitely, like, this was the end game. This was always the end game, was eventually we move prices up, and eventually we, like, actually start making money on this thing.
Yeah.
At some point, your streaming service has to become profitable. And you look at the movies and TV industry, and they never figured that out. And now that's causing a lot of problems for a lot of people. They never figured out we're getting a bunch of money brought into us by investors to keep us afloat, but we still aren't making a profit on our own. So I think Microsoft has realized, like, okay, at some point, we need to, like, turn this into a sustainable business, not just a big business. And I think that makes sense. I don't think this feels good. I don't think anyone comes away being like, oh, what a good move, Microsoft. I feel great about this. Nice job. And yeah, I think that, ironically enough, this is probably what, like, the CMA and what everyone was warning everyone about. They were like, hey, this is going to become a problem where, like, it feels like this is the only place you can get your games. On Xbox, it feels like the only way to get your games is through Game Pass, because it feels like the best value, but also it's tying you in for upwards of $150 a year now, which is, like, a lot of money. Some people don't spend that much money on video games every year already. Like, some people just buy indie games, some people just buy Madden and Call of Duty, and that still wouldn't get you over the $150 mark. Like, suddenly Game Pass has become more expensive than, for certain people, for very select demographics, than simply buying the games. But yeah, I think this was bound to happen.
Yeah, I think that's why it's imperative, and why you always hear when Microsoft talks about this, like, they still give people all the options. So it's like, they could point to, and I think they're right to. We're like, hey, if Game Pass doesn't make sense for you, you should just be buying the games, and we're not taking that away from you. You could buy the games, and that's is where they make the most of their money, is for people buying their games, is what they say. Like, that's the bulk of the money for Xbox and for the gaming division at Microsoft, is actually people spending $70 or $60 on a game, whatever it is. So yeah, and at a certain point, it's like, oh, how entitled are we to a $1 trial? It's like, okay, I feel that way because it was on the table for so long. Or for the last couple of years, even if it's on and off, it's like most of the time it was there. Now it's gone. It's like, okay, that's a little bit frustrating, but the service is $15 per month for Ultimate, $10 a month for just the console version or the PC version. I think that one's.
And I think, like, as long as it's still a good service, people will be pretty happy about it. Yeah. And right now it's still a good service. I'm not paying for it at the moment just because I'm not using my Xbox. I'm playing other things because there's so many fucking other games. But yeah, I think there'll come a time where I'm like, okay, Starfield's out, Forza's out, Sea of Stars will be on it. What else is coming out this year that's coming to it? Like, I might want to go. Yeah, I might want to go back to Exoprimal. There'll probably be a time around December where I'm like, okay, I have some free time. I'm off college. I'll just dip in and try a bunch of these games. And I might not even sign up for you can't sign up for the year, but I might just sign up for a month and then cancel it.
Yeah, and they do make it easy to cancel. They are not afraid of that. That's something. It's but obviously they're counting on a lot of people not canceling, which of course I think many people won't. But it is a possibility, and if people want to be aggressive about, like, dipping in for a month, dipping back out, waiting for the next game, they have that option available to them. All right, Sega and Atlas will stream a special broadcast from Tokyo Game Show. This is from Chris Scullion at VGC. Sega and Atlas will host a special broadcast from the Tokyo Game Show next month. The stream will be part of of Sega New, a monthly broadcast that's held on the official Sega Japan YouTube channel. According to Sega, the special TGS broadcast will tell players all about the newest titles from Sega and Atlas. The broadcast will take place on September 21st at 7 p.m. Japan time. While no further details have been given, Sega and Atlas currently have a number of games in development that are likely to feature during the stream. Sonic Superstars is set for release on October 17th, so it may appear during the presentation. So too could Yakuza spinoff Like a Dragon Gaiden, The Man Who Erased His Name, which follows a month later on November 9th. Sega also has has Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth planned for early 2024, so fans may get more information on that. Beyond that, Atlas has Persona 5 Tactica coming, Persona 3 Reload, which is also coming, and Metaphor ReFantasio, which is coming next year. Do you expect, I mean, that's a lot of stuff already, so I'm not expecting too much more beyond those games that we already know about, but I mean, people, of course, are going to start talking about Persona 6. I think it feels like it's not time for that.
No. The big Sega, for me, had the best showing at Gamescom as a company.
Well, that's fantastic to hear.
They had Persona 5 Tactica, which I really enjoyed. Persona 3 Reload looks properly fucking incredible, and I think the main thing is seeing that art style at 60 FPS, not being tied to the PS3 like Persona 5 was. It just looks so goddamn good in motion. Like a Dragon Gaiden looks really fucking fun.
Right.
I have a preview of that going up hopefully later today. You should also check out my roommate Scott McRae over at The Mirror. He interviewed the studio head, and I'm pretty sure that's going up soon. And then they also had Total War, which people seemed really what is it? They do Total War, right?
They do Total War, yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Creative Assembly.
Looked really good. Sonic Superstars, which people who I know who like Sonic thought was good, and the person I sent to the Sonic Superstars appointment went, maybe I don't like Sonic anymore, and I was like, yes! And then they also had Hyenas, which I played about an hour and a half of because my demo kept, like, my headphones for the demo kept on breaking, which was very funny. And they heard that I was doing a preview, so they were like, no, we have to get you into a proper game. So I played a bunch of that, and I really like playing Hyenas, but I don't know if there's any place for it.
Right.
Like, it's the same. I wrote a preview for it last year, and my preview was like, this seems interesting. Will it be able to compete with Hunt Showdown and Tarkov? And a year later, that question is way fucking like harder because those things are way more ingrained now. It plays really fun, but like, I'm not sure if it will be able to break through. And they have a load of shit to show. They have so much stuff to show, even just from the stuff that they've already announced. And I think the thing that people haven't quite got yet is that Persona 3 Reload for them is a new Persona game.
Yeah.
It is that much of a remake. The way that they are doing...
I got that with the last trailer. It finally clicked for me with that last trailer. It was like, oh, yeah, this is like a big deal Persona release. Yeah,
the 3D environments, the way you move around the world, the way you interact with it, the level of detail in it, it does feel... It feels like one of the... It's the closest... You know, the way that we've got in the HD 2D versions of, like, older games?
Yeah.
It feels like the closest thing that we have gotten to that for a PS2 era game, where they're like, okay, there were constraints on the PS2 still. What if we just, like, completely moved away from them and modernized it for modern consoles? And I was really, really impressed by it. And the combat feels really good. I think that game will be really interesting. We were talking before the show, and they also sent us out a press packet with info on the games. Apparently, Persona has now passed 17 million units sold. You have to imagine most of those are 4 and 5, and then the spin-offs. Yeah. So it seems like that franchise is getting bigger exponentially. I think Sega has a really good showing, and I've always said that, I've said this for a while now, I think Sega might be one of my favorite publishers, even though I fucking hate Sonic, which is so stupid.
You're just a big Knuckles fan, of course.
Oh, yeah. Jeff, I love the Knuckles.
Of course.
To be fair, Idris Elba, like...
Well, yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
But yeah, like a Dragon is in a really good place where I write about this a bit in my preview that's going up later. It finally feels like it's starting to stop being the Yakuza franchise. Like, they made that break a while ago, but the way that Like a Dragon Gaiden hooks into the Judgment games, the way it hooks into 7, the way it brings in side characters and a lot of older characters. It feels like it's going beyond the, okay, this is just about Kiryu's story and the Tojo clan and the Omi Alliance, and we're going into, hey, this is a bigger world of life in Japan and the underworld of Japan beyond just crime. And I think that's what they want it to be. They don't want it to just be tied to the mafia, basically. Which someone was saying to me, like, "Oh, do they have like a Yakuza cafe in Japan?" I was like, "I don't think that would go down well. I don't think you could do that in the current state. Maybe they'll do a Like a Dragon cafe at some point, but I don't think you could set up a Yakuza cafe in Japan."
Might be difficult to pull it out. Also, the licensing fees for the Yakuza, their IP rights, they're such sticklers about that stuff. You don't want to deal with that anymore. Sega figuring stuff out. They had their PC stuff figured out for a while. Seeing them kind of get everything else under control and start making good decisions with Atlas games, that's weird. It's weird to see them doing this. I remember like a year ago on this show where like Sega is just completely lost.
Atlas still don't make good decisions where like you can tell it's one of their marketing things where they're like, we have an announcement next week, some perfume, and everyone's like, oh, okay. And then you can tell when it's Sega, because Sega will be like, okay, this is what we're going to show you.
Yes.
And people know what they're going to get.
Yep. All right, let's see here. Let's keep moving. 2007 run and gun classic Alien Hominid HD is coming to most modern platforms. This is from Chris Scullion at VGC. Alien Hominid HD will be coming to most modern platforms, developer The Behemoth has announced. The classic run and gun game was originally released on entertainment website Newgrounds as a Flash game back in 2002, before being ported to the PS2, Xbox, and GameCube in 2004, and the Game Boy Advance in 2006. I think it's one of the GameCube games I actually have back in that closet over there. An HD version was then released on Xbox 360 in 2007, and this version is still the only way to play it on modern systems to date via Xbox backwards compatibility. In a blog post, the Behemoth stated that it planned to remedy this by releasing Alien Hominid HD on Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, Switch, and Steam. The game will be released later this year alongside Alien Hominid Invasion, an all-new reimagination of Alien Hominid with new gameplay and new mechanics. This is planned for release on Xbox One, Switch, and PC. I loved Alien Hominid. I wonder if, like, does anyone even, like, remember this game anymore? Lex, have you ever played Alien Hominid, or was it before your time?
I knew Alien Hominid through osmosis. A bunch of people sort of talking about, like, you know, this weird thing that was on the internet, and then they put it onto video game consoles, and I was like, that's fucking wild. I was way into, I didn't play Castle Crashers, but I played so much Battle Block when I was younger. I loved Battle Block a bunch. I played it on a PC that like could not run games at all, but it could run Battle Block fine. I think the Behemoth are in a weird spot. Their last shipped game was Pit People in 2018, and I know they said pretty openly that game didn't do the numbers that they wanted it to do. And yeah, it feels like they did their Castle Crashers HD, and now they're doing the HD version of this. I'm assuming they just want to get money coming into the company, but
I agree.
They haven't announced anything new yet. So I don't know. I love the Behemoth. I love what they do, but also they do feel like a company that's kind of still in that 2008 era. They have never really broken out of their legacy shadow of their first 2 titles.
Yeah, and I mean, I think going back and going to ground and saying we're going to re-release those games and get some money coming in is a perfectly fine strategy. But you're right, you'd love to do something else after this. But hey, if they go back and they make more Castle Crashers and Alien Hominid games, I'll be happy. Also, Christian wanted me to stop saying hominid, so I'm just going to go hominid.
Oh, apparently they are working on a new Alien Hominid game as well, like a totally new game.
I think that's what. Yeah, this is the Alien Hominid Invasion. Is coming out like around the same time as this, basically. So they got, that's going to be a reimagination of the entire franchise, it said. So we'll see. Star Wars Outlaws won't be tied down by the fate of the galaxy. This is from Alex Hopley at Game Reactor. If there's one thing that's annoying about Star Wars stories, it's that some of them can try and make you believe that you'll be saving the galaxy only to have little to no real implications for the wider story. Star Wars The Force Unleashed is a great example of a story that showed us incredibly cool characters, only for them to be killed off because they didn't exist in canon. However, Star Wars Outlaws is looking to avoid this problem by removing the game's narrative from any ties to the fate of the wider galaxy. Speaking to Game Informer, narrative director Naveed Kavari said Kay's dream is to land a score that will allow her to live life free and find her place in the galaxy. This is especially true after a heist goes wrong and she unexpectedly becomes one of the galaxy's most wanted. By necessity, she'll step into the underworld and take on jobs with criminal syndicates with the aim to pull off one of the greatest heists the galaxy has seen. This is where I kind of want these Star Wars side stories to be at, Alexi, where...
Me and all my Andor homies.
Yes, exactly, right. I mean, Andor is like Andor's one where like it's like that one's definitely like still it matters greatly to the overall story, but they're telling it from a completely new angle.
They're telling it from a personal angle, and that's a really refreshing thing to see characters in a level of detail that you don't usually get to see in Star Wars.
Exactly, and then so if you are going to be working on something where it's like, hey, which side of things should we go on? Should we try to matter to the greater story, or should we try to be a personal story? I think most of the time you're going to be safer off going with the personal story. It's just there are some risks of that. I think the problem with like one of the problems with Solo, and not necessarily for me, but I think for the wider audience was it didn't feel like it mattered to the ongoing Star Wars narrative that people felt invested in. So like, I don't even need to go see that. But at the same, like if the game is good here, I think people won't care. They'll be like, no, this makes perfect sense. There's all this whole universe to explore. It does remind me of like the Han Solo books, the old Han Solo books, where it's like before he was Han Solo in the movies, here's what he was doing, and it was like there was still like high stakes for all these things. He pulled off some heists. He had like a lot of adventures, but it's like it wasn't like he was part of the rebellion before he actually joined the rebellion. So it's like
you can have high stakes in like a personal sense too. You can have different types of the high stakes doesn't need to be will a planet explode. The high stakes can literally just be, hey, will I get to live like a nice quiet life in this really shitty galaxy?
Yep, and it's like, and I think it's yeah, I mean it's like Norn Games says, isn't that just Andor? It's like, no, again, Andor is directly related to like the people that are affecting events in Andor are affecting events in Clone Wars and stuff like that, and all those politics interact with one another. And it sounds like they're saying here with Kay is that she is going to be doing her own thing, and you're probably not going to be running into the rebellion and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's probably the right answer. I'm looking forward to this game. It seems like it seems like the big Star Wars game that people have been looking for since like 1313 first got announced and never came out.
The large shadow that game casts.
Exactly, the unbelievably incomprehensibly large shadow that game casts. Doesn't make any sense, but yet we always reference it. So here we go. Maybe we'll be done referencing it after we get Star Wars Outlaws. Classic first-person shooter The Darkness may be remastered, according to studio CEO. This comes from Matt Scomer at DualShockers. The Darkness, a horror-themed first-person shooter that was first released 16 years ago, may be getting a revival if a tweet from the CEO of one development studio is to be believed. Stephen Kick is CEO of Night Dive Studios, a US-based developer best known for reviving games that have fallen under the category of abandonware, a general term that tends to refer to software that is not considered viable and has not been actively in use by its creators and intellectual property owners. Late on Saturday, Kick responded to a post on Twitter from one gamer who expressed an urge to play The Darkness without booting up his PlayStation 3 and was hopeful someone would remaster the game and port it to PC. It's on the list, Kick's response reads. Night Dive has not made any official announcements on its website regarding a remaster of The Darkness, however. The last set of updates on its new page is filled with recent announcements about other games the studio is working on to remaster: Turok 3 Shadow of Oblivion, Star Wars Dark Forces, which made their respective debuts in 2000 and 1995. This feels like the kind of, like, there are enough of these kinds of games out there that Night Dive eventually gets to all of them.
This feels like the most modern thing.
Yes, this does feel like the most modern one, but also not so modern that this is weird. I think they would still end up doing this, right?
Yeah, the extent of my knowledge with The Darkness is an old Danny O'Dwyer Escape from Mount Stupid GameSpot episode where he drilled the name Jackie Estacado into my head as the guy who during the loading screen talks about kicking a fucking dog. And that's all I remember about it. And also you can watch like black and white movies in it that weren't licensed. But it seems like a fucking cool game and everyone loves it. So why not? Let's go back to it.
You could like go on a date, right? And watch the black and white movie.
Yeah, I think you could just stay in your apartment at the opening and like watch an entire movie if you wanted.
Right. I think they had a couple of movies in there. I always want to like stream
To Kill a
games.
Mockingbird, that was it.
Okay, yeah, I want to like stream. Yeah, I think you could watch a whole movie. Yes, you could. I always want to stream games that have that in there and just sit there and like watch the movie together with everybody because it's like, hey, it's in the game. We could stream this.
What's the? Oh, I won't bring that game up. Never mind.
Well, yeah, he's no longer part of that studio. I thought he probably still owns it, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Sparks of Hope director teases return to glory for Rayman and secret DLC message. This comes from Chris Penwell at Destructoid. Rayman fans are over the moon after the announcement that the limbless hero will be featured in the next Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope DLC. However, there might be more to look forward to. The game's director, David Soliani, teased a return to glory for the French platforming mascot Wednesday. He also confirmed there will be a secret message if you finish the DLC with a 100% completion rate. The prospects of the first Rayman game since 2013 might come to fruition. According to fan community leader Itzel Drake from Rayman Together, Sparks of Hope director David Soliani sent a message to the character's fan base just before the launch of the Phantom Show DLC. I hope that all the community and all Rayman players support us as much as possible because I'm on a mission. My mission is to be able to bring Rayman back to the glory he deserves. Do you think, Lexi, that this is him hinting that there is something already happening? Or do you think this is him trying to drum up support so that this DLC does well enough that he can justify a pitch to make something Rayman going forward?
Honestly, I just hope they keep on letting David Soliani make his games.
I agree.
Because there's nothing else like it at Ubisoft by quite a large margin. And it seems like it doesn't cost them that much money to make those games. And maybe if they like actually marketed them in a reasonable way and then just kind of like put them out in the busiest month of the year for them to get like destroyed by everything else. I think David Soliani is the type of guy who would love to work on a Rayman game, mainly because we allow him to work with some more composers that he likes, which I think is his like favorite thing in the world. But yeah, I'm sure he would. He seems like someone who has good ideas for classic franchises because he looked at Mario and he went, well, what can we do with this? And he and his team, I should say, they looked at Mario and they said, well, what's something wholly new that we can do with this? And I think bringing Rayman.
Everybody loves him, I hear.
Yeah, but bringing Rayman back into the spotlight through Mario was a really good idea. It probably hasn't worked as well because that game didn't sell as well as they wanted.
Right.
But I still think that, like, you know, I would like to see more weird old platformers that haven't gotten to see the light of day in a while to get some love again from talented developers. So why not?
Yep, I would really appreciate this. I could go for a new Rayman. I think if they're gonna make a Rayman, I hope they make it a 3D platformer. But I would not say no to a new one of those UbiArts sort of 2D side-scrolling ones they did a couple years ago, probably like a decade ago now. I think it is a decade ago now. Those were very good as well.
Yeah, the last one came out on the Wii U first, so it's been quite a while.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right. I have the poll from last week. Let's get to it right now. What do you think Sony is doing with Days Gone? 7% say it's making a game and a movie. 5% say it's making a game but no movie. 19% say it's making a movie but no game. And 69%, nice, say it's not making anything related to Days Gone. That's where I put my vote as well. I think I would be excited at this point to be wrong about that. Just for them to come out and be like, no, Days Gone is our next big thing. We're pushing that the way we've been pushing Horizon. I would love to see that. I don't think they are, though, but we'll see.
Days Gone feels like the Yellowstone of video games.
Yes.
Like a game for dads and people who like the idea of prestige stuff but don't like good prestige stuff.
Yes, give me my trashy prestige, which Yellowstone definitely is. But I tried watching Yellowstone. I'm like, I'm a dad. This should be for me. I love Kevin Costner. Are you kidding me? Kevin Costner is basically my president. I love that guy. He was
Superman's dad.
Yeah, and I was like, I'll watch that movie because he's Superman's dad. That's how much of a Kevin Costner fan I am. I know it doesn't make sense. I never said it would. But I'll try to watch that show, and it's just so goddamn dumb. It's so dumb. Nothing matters, and everything happens. Everything happens in that show, and none of it matters. I did remember the moment. I'm sure I've told this story before. The moment I stopped watching, it's just like everything's going wrong for these people, and then the lady who's like a teacher like goes to her job, and so one of the students punches her, and she gets knocked into a coma. And they're like, "Why? Like, what precipitated that, like what was going on in their lives that put her in such danger. No, it was just a random a random event. And there's like 5 of those every episode. It's insane.
But like, honestly, the guy who created Sicario and wrote Hell or High Water, those are like 2 of my favorite movies. And he realized like, oh, I can just like keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over, and no one will call me out on it, and I'll make
tons of money.
$1 billion.
Yes, he's got like 5 shows going.
Yeah, you made a fantastic movie with Ben Foster and Chris Pine being extremely hot in it. You can do whatever you want now.
If you want a show where a lot happens and it's just cool, 24. Can I recommend 24? Man, just fucking snap that neck. It was good stuff. All right, I got a
24 check.
What's that?
24 check.
I finished season 2 and I've not started season 3 yet because I've been working on video games instead. But again, that second season ended with a huge killing spree from our boy Jack Bauer. And the last time I enacted it, I pulled my headphones out and completely crashed Discord, so I'll be careful. But just him like grabbing that neck and running up the wall and snapping it, in addition to like shooting a bunch of people, which was great. It was very exciting, very well done. Yeah, and then I played a little bit of 24 the game. Which I don't know if it's up on the site yet. Did we get that out yet? We'll get that up soon. Okay.
America was so cool. I wish it was real.
In my heart, 24's always been real. Lexi, before we get to this poll question, why don't you tell people where they could find you, what you got going on?
Yeah, so I have loads of stuff going on. I'll have like 5 pieces going up on Shack News, Persona 5, Persona 3, Warhammer, or Space Marine 2, Pacific Drive, and something else I'm forgetting right now. I have a Like a Dragon Gaiden going up on Push Square. You will be able to find my work in upcoming Play magazines. I'm still running Start Menu, which is a great place to get started in the games industry. Contact us at hello@startmenu.co.uk. I'm a bit behind on emails. I know some people who are watching the show did reach out, and I will get back to people. Also, the last thing I wanted to say, I needed to make sure that Mike knew that my friendship with you and him is over. Tam and Lucy are my new best friends now. Yeah.
Completely respect that.
And it's purely because they managed to survive like 300,000 people in Clone, and ye haven't. Ye haven't proven yourselves worthy.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, once you do prove yourself worthy, like I might talk to you again, but until then, like I'm sorry, Jeff.
I don't think I would survive. Pretty sure I would melt. 300,000 people, I'd just look at that and I would just I would turn into a puddle, and that would be the end of Jeffrey. All right, we got a new poll question going up. Will you try Saints Row and PlayStation Plus? A story we didn't get to, but it's coming to PlayStation Plus. And I'm like, oh, is this like going to be a chance for people to maybe reassess this game? Yes, no, I've already played it. Are your options? We'll discuss that on the show tomorrow. On Wednesday. Before then, though, on giantbomb.com, we got the Giant Bombcast tomorrow. We will have some quick looks going up this week. We have the Starfield coverage starting on August 31st when that embargo goes up. A whole bunch of other things are happening. Then we're traveling to PAX. It's a busy week, so give your boy some slack as I try to make it all organized and make it all make sense in my brain. All right, Lexi, thank you so much for spending today talking with me about video games. You know I appreciate it.
We were going to talk about video games. I just wanted to talk more about like Yellowstone.
Thank you for talking with me about Yellowstone. I here's how busy I am. On Sunday, I started the Animorphs book, and a book on tape, and I only listened to it while doing like stuff around the house. And by like midday, I'd finished it. Like it's like 3.5 hours, but it's like that was just 3.5 hours of just doing shit before I could even get to playing games. So I've listened to the Animorphs book, book 1. Jan, whenever you're ready, I'm ready. You just look out. I don't know if I have plenty to say, but got something to say.
You have so much time for another podcast too.
Exactly. We should just tack on like a 5-minute podcast at the end of something else, and just like that could be the Animorphs podcast. Janimorphs. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. You're the best audience in gaming. We're gonna get out of here. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye. All right. I gotta get to a meeting, and I gotta figure out what this day is gonna